Previously on After the Uprising.
Yes, I'm at 9640 Diamond Drive, and there's a car on fire in my parking lot.
Seals was found shot inside a burning car in Riverview on Diamond Drive.
I do know that there is a lot of sentiment in the community that they want justice, they want the truth.
You know, you still got a life that has a tab on it from your past endeavors, you know what I'm saying? I think he got set up by the people he was in the fucking music situation with.
Man, but I ain't never seen Bruh Sweat. It's like he wanted all the smoke.
He said a white boy came from out of the woods.
He said a guy with long hair and a ponytail.
A white boy. Next thing he know, the car was on fire.
Don't shoot! Don't shoot!
What you're looking at is the aftermath of the grand jury deciding not to indict officers.
29-year-old Darren Seals was murdered before his killer set his car on fire.
Once they put out the flames, they discovered Seals' body inside with a gunshot wound.
He pointed a gun on me and my 14-year-old little brother, it's Ferguson PD. Grabbed me by my hair, slammed me out the car. He said you might want to pick your enemies better.
This is After the Uprising, Season 2, The Murder of Darren Seals.
Did you ever receive the report from the medical examiner's office?
I have what they put on the death certificate.
Okay.
Yeah, I went and got the birth certificate and the death certificate, but no, I didn't talk to no examiner.
And you don't have any documentation from the medical examiner's office?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I asked to see my son's body, and they said, no, we wouldn't torment you like that. He said, I said his face. I said, I want to see my son's face. And he said, man, we can't let you see his face because he don't have a face. He said he's like a skeleton. And he's completely burned.
This is Darren Seals' mother, Bonnie Otis, who goes by the name Bonnie. Over the course of several months, we had many conversations with Bonnie, some in which I sat with her in her living room for 4 or 5 hours at a time. Others were over the phone when she would unexpectedly call to talk about this or that, and we would have to quickly activate a call recording app. From the outset, we will report that, sadly, Bonnie died in August of 2023. A very religious woman, Bonnie suffered from a handful of physical ailments. She needed dialysis treatment for her kidneys 3 times a week. She also had oxygen tanks to assist her breathing. Despite these ailments, Bonnie wasn't a frail woman to look at her. Thin in frame, she carried herself in a proud way, always well-dressed and standing up straight with her Louis Vuitton purse on her arm and her matching head wrap. From a young age, Bonnie lived a very hard life, marred by intense childhood abuse and poverty. Darren's father spent a lot of time in jail, so Bonnie raised Darren, who you'll hear her refer to as Man-Man, alongside his older sister LaToya and his younger brother Byron. With their father not around, Darren looked out for his younger brother, and both boys felt exceedingly protective of Bonnie.
Him and Darren was together in this truck, and he said, promise me if I leave first, you promise to take care of Mama. And he said, okay, I will. And Man said to him too, if you leave first, I promise I'm going to take care of Mama. So whichever one of them went first, that was the bond they had.
It was very important for us to get to know Bonnie for several reasons. One of which was because in 2016, when Darren died, he was still very close to his mother and spoke to her regularly, including by phone only hours before his death. We thought Bonnie would be key to our getting a sense of what Darren was up to right before he was murdered. When we started our interviews, COVID was just winding down, so Bonnie had spent a lot of time in isolation. Because she was so grateful to be connecting again in person with people, live people, she would jump from topic to topic and we would have to keep up with her. Here's an example where I was asking about Darren and his girlfriend Naomi and where they lived.
He wanted, because he moved from my house to her apartment, and then he wanted to move back here. And she trying to talk to me like I'm his friend, like I ain't his mama, like basically like she really don't want me to let my son come back home. I was like, this girl lost her mind. So I supposed to lock my door on my son, and he and her in Sprint store, they videotape all that. Even the Sprint, that's how I know it didn't have nothing to do with no kids. It didn't have nothing to do with no, well, I mean, you know, like them little young guys. This was bigger than that. Anytime Sprint involved in doing undercover stuff, why y'all won't let
What are you talking
nobody
about,
have the
Sprint?
phone?
I don't understand what you're talking about, Sprint.
Because
Listening to Bonnie could be a puzzle. We weren't always sure what she was talking about. She put things in her own order that we would have to work to iron out later. But in doing so, we learned a lot. For one, she would often reference some investigative reporter who had contacted her, who seemingly offered his services to help her find out what had happened to Darren. She wouldn't tell us his name, though.
The investigator, the one that I was dealing with, he's a reporter. He truly knows this story so big, but he can't even do nothing with it.
What about introducing us? Maybe you could float it to this investigator to see if he'd want to do something. Maybe we'd work with this investigator, and the stuff that he can turn up helps your case. The stuff we turn up can help your case. We put out a podcast. He puts out articles at the same time. It's a thought.
But you know what, to be honest, he came to me because I had so much information that helped him not to even have to work hard. Because he was asking me to do this and do that. And I said, oh, okay, I already got this.
Yeah, but I mean, isn't the goal to get new information and get as close as possible to proving all the things that need proven here? So, I mean, so if you make it a little easier for him by providing things to let him do what he does and get that to the next step and provide you with more information, then, what's the problem there?
I gave him some information, and, you sending me pictures, asking me who this person is and who that person is. But he was more like Isaiah. Heard a great story. I mean, he was real smart with it, but really can't afford to really do the things that he needs to do.
When Bonnie says the reporter was like Isaiah, she's referring to Isaiah Washington, the actor from Grey's Anatomy, who apparently also approached Bonnie and tried to get a movie project off the ground with her, which eventually fizzled. In fact, when Bonnie died, Isaiah Washington posted on his Facebook page, quote, "I just found out that my dear friend Mary Bonnie Otis is gone." He said he wanted to share with her that he'd finally found a serious investor who wanted to tell her story, and that for 7 years he had tried to get her story told. Apparently that's all true.
I said, Isaiah, if you can't fund this story, let somebody who can. Basically, he was being a middleman. He's slicing and dicing the pie, and the pie ain't even his. Here's the thing. I didn't want nobody to think that I can be nickel and dime. I said,
Bonnie believed her story was big, Hollywood big. And at times she suggested a podcast was too small to contain everything about her and Darren. But our primary concern was just finding out what had happened to Darren and sharing that information with the world. And we would be frustrated by Bonnie when that didn't seem to be a priority for her. Like this instance, when we asked her about the medical examiner's report on Darren's death. We had been refused a copy by the medical examiner's office, and we wanted Bonnie to help us get it.
So you've never seen the medical examiner's report ever?
No. I have some kind of file or some kind of records that the investigator sent me.
Is this the investigator that you don't mention their name?
Yeah. Whatever he sent me, I wouldn't look at it. I'm gonna look at it one day, but I don't
forward it to us.
Well, I have to look at it first and see. I'm gonna put it this way: I might, but I don't know. I mean, I gotta
Would you allow us to write a letter on your behalf and you send it to the medical examiner to get a copy of the medical record and then share it with us?
But I think that's what me and him just went through.
Bonnie eventually showed us this email from the investigative reporter. He had sent her instructions on how she could ask the medical examiner for Darren's autopsy report, but she had never opened that email. When she showed it to us, we could see that it had not been read. Though Bonnie had her own way of telling a story, she had a mind like a steel trap. After reviewing the many hours of conversations we'd recorded with her, we were able to find that she'd given us a lot of interesting information about Darren's life. For instance, one day when she called Ray from her chair at the dialysis center, she started telling a story about Darren as a young man.
How they first met, we stayed on Green Valley. I always took my kids to church. And if I even saw my son with like a red scarf or something like that, like in his pocket, he'll sneak it out the house, but he'll forget to take it out of his pocket by the time we get home. I said, what is that? Because you ain't finna be in no game.
When Bonnie said that Darren was keeping a red scarf in his pocket, she's referring to his activity with a local gang, something she didn't approve of. And in talking about the local gang rivalries, she brings up someone named Jaybird.
Jaybird was Council Point, and my son was over with Green Valley. So Green Valley and Council Point, Jaybird used to box everybody in his neighborhood in Council Point. So Jaybird heard my son was a really good boxer. They said, I know somebody that you can't beat. And he was like, who? They said, this dude that's over in Council Point. And so he goes over in Council Point to meet Jaybird, for them to box. Not to kill each other, but they had to fight. Because Jaybird was the best fighter in Council Point, and Darren was the best fighter in Green Valley. So they wanted them to come together and see who wins. So they fought. After they got through fighting, because both of them were so tough, they became best friends.
Jaybird, you'll remember, was mentioned by Tef Poe back in episode 2. Tef told us that he heard that someone named Jaybird had been incarcerated, and Darren had promised to help him with something during that stretch, but Darren didn't follow through. According to Bonnie, after a boxing match that came to a draw, Darren and Jaybird became best friends. She told us she would pick Jaybird up and drive him and Darren to school football games where they would fight with other boys. She also told us that when they were older, Jaybird was shot at while he and Darren were at a barber shop.
So my son and Jaybird was at the barbershop, my son in there in the chair, Jaybird on the front talking to some other people. So then this car drives down the street. And when this car drives down the street, and he just started shooting. And as he was shooting, Jaybird started ducking, and he started running.
Is this before or after Darren gets shot in 2013?
This is before. And
this is before. Okay.
Remembering what Tef Poe told us, we figured we would ask Bonnie if she knew anything about a responsibility Darren may have had to take care of something for Jaybird while he was incarcerated.
Hadn't Jaybird gone to jail in 2016 and wasn't Darren helping him out on the outside? Do you know anything about that?
Darren wasn't helping him out. Darren makes up bad. Darren was in a movement. He wasn't helping Jaybird at all.
Bonnie seems to think Darren wasn't doing anything for Jaybird in that time frame. Maybe he was, and she just didn't know about it. Maybe this is consistent with what Tef Poe heard, that Darren wasn't living up to a commitment he'd made. It's hard to say. More with Bonnie after the break. Now, back to the show. Not only was Bonnie one of the last people to speak with Darren, but after his death, it seems as though Bonnie became a central hub that people turned to provide clues and tips about what had happened to him. Some of it is verifiable and some of it contradictory. Now that Bonnie is gone, what she told us will remain the only collection of this information. And sorting through it, We did our best to build a picture of Darren's last day alive. It was September 5th, 2016, Labor Day.
The last call between Byron and Darren, like, what did Darren impart, generally speaking, to Byron? Like, where was he when they were having that call? And what was the nature of the conversation?
He was at home with me, and they was just having, just a regular brother conversation. He didn't sound like he was in no danger, like anything bad.
We asked Byron if he remembered that call.
The last phone call I had with my brother was, I had talked to him around the time while he was out. And he was supposed to take me to the mall and go grab some new shoes and just chop it up and go out to eat and just talk and, just have our regular little day. And his last words was, "I love you," same for me to him.
At the time, Darren was living in his own apartment near Ferguson. And according to Bonnie, Darren's girlfriend Naomi frequently stayed with him, though she did not have her own key. Apparently, many of Darren's friends were at a Labor Day barbecue, but Darren chose not to attend. Instead, he and Naomi spent that afternoon at his grandmother's house.
When was the last time you ever spoke with or saw Darren?
He went to the grocery store for my mom, and usually on the holiday she always cooked. So him and Naomi went to the store. While they was at the store, he had asked Naomi get some taco bowls and make some tacos. I was over my sister's house, but that's what I was calling him to tell him. She brought you some chicken wings.
She covered a lot of ground there, but it breaks down to this. Darren went to the store to buy food for his grandmother. Naomi was with him, and they bought ingredients for a taco bowl dinner they were going to prepare for themselves. Bonnie called Darren to tell him that if he wanted, he could come eat grilled chicken at her sister's place.
After talking to me, he ended up on the phone with Kilo, and she told me the whole conversation. She listened to everything he said.
Bonnie is telling us something Naomi later told her, that after he'd hung up with his mother, Darren had ended up on the phone with Kilo. Kilo, if you recall from episode 3, was one of the members of the rap group Darren was managing at the time, the Bottom Boys. Bonnie is saying that Naomi listened to Darren's whole conversation with Kilo.
Some white guy was there, and he was talking about doing a video. Kilo gave him a price. He said, "No, man, he charging too much."
According to what Bonnie says Naomi told her, Darren's phone call with Kilo was about a white music video maker that Kilo wanted to use. But Darren was saying the price this director quoted was too high, and that he would come right over to discuss the matter. This seems to match up well with what we were told by Sharif Allen, that Darren's death revolved around an argument over something music-related.
He was like, "No," because he was telling them, "I got y'all. Don't worry about anything." And he was telling the truth, and he said he got, because he was waiting on a settlement. He settled for $55,000, and he had borrowed some money from his lawyer to take them out of town.
It turns out Darren sued the apartment complex where he had been shot 6 times back in 2013, and he was awarded a large settlement. Bonnie is saying here that Darren was telling Kilo not to worry about money, and that he planned to use what he borrowed from his lawyer against his incoming settlement to take the Bottom Boys members out of town to meet with record executives.
After that, he didn't hang up the phone with Kilo. He just dropped her off, and he said, "I'll be right back."
So according to Bonnie's memory of what Naomi told her, Darren was still on the phone with Kilo when he dropped her off at his apartment, where she began cooking dinner, and Darren said he would be right back. This would have been, according to Bonnie's memory of the story, around 6 p.m.
Here's what I'm trying to figure out is the first phone call regarding the Jeep on fire is like 1:45 a.m. But my question would be, if he was telling Naomi, "I'll be right back," and leaves with her ready to make him dinner, so that would seem to be that he would think that he could get back home and possibly eat dinner and make the 40-minute trip to GM in time for his 11 p.m. shift.
He didn't even leave that late. He left my mom's house. And when he left my mom's house, he called me. And here's the thing. It was still real early. So he should have went down there, made it back to eat and take a nap. This was like about 5 or 6 o'clock. He would have had time to eat and take a nap. At least get him like a little power nap, couple hours sleep, and still make it to work.
The timeline, I always place the timeline much later in the night. Like he gets called over to some late night party or whoever tells him to meet, whatever the actual story is, right? Whatever happened to him, if he stopped updating people and Naomi never got another update, then like that sounds like there's this huge gap of time from let's say 6 p.m. until the Jeep is reported on fire at like 1:45 a.m.
That was my question.
This gap in time, if Bonnie's memory is correct, is roughly 7 hours between when Darren is talking to Kilo on the phone in the car next to Naomi and when he is ultimately found in his burning Jeep early the next morning. Bonnie had told us that Darren was supposed to be at work that night at the GM plant at 11 p.m. But reading his social media, we later learned that he had switched to a morning shift. We asked Byron what he remembered about this.
Had he had a shift, when did that shift tend to start?
Early in the morning, usually. Because at the time when I was staying with him, he would go to work from maybe, I think, from 7 to like something close around to the evening.
If Darren didn't have to work that night, he wouldn't necessarily have had to rush back from his meeting with Kilo in order to have time to eat his dinner and then make the 40-minute drive to the GM plant. But we still thought it would be odd, or at least rude, for him to tell Naomi that she should start preparing dinner and that he'd be right back. And then to just ditch her? Darren's final social media post was made on Facebook at 6:26 p.m. It's a photo of the words "Bottom Boys" spray painted on a wall. Darren tagged one person with the post, Bottom Boys member Ricky Smith, aka Little Ricky or LR. We don't know if he posted this photo because he was with LR, but it raises the question of whether Darren had gone to meet not only Kilo, but the rest of the Bottom Boys, which wouldn't be strange if they were discussing their next music video. As far as the timeline of events goes, Bonnie said at some point in the evening, Darren had butt dialed her. She said when she answered, she could hear talking and music, but that Darren couldn't hear her calling out to him.
He kept butt calling me. When he was talking, you could hear music, and I kept saying, Mammy, and I was like, he butt called me like 3 times.
Your mom said that Darren butt dialed her a few times that evening.
Right.
Did she describe that with you?
Yeah, she did. She had told me he butt called, I think, about twice, 2 or 3 times.
Do you happen to know if those butt dials happened after the last call that you had with him or before?
I think it was after.
Byron guessed Darren had spoken to him around 8:30 or 9, so these butt dials would have come after that. But this information is very tenuous, as we're asking Byron to remember phone calls that happened 8 years earlier when he'd only been 14 years old. So take it or leave it. What does seem reliable is that Darren left his apartment to go meet Kilo to talk about something Bottom Boys related. The supposed white music video director story is hard to tease out. All of the Bottom Boys videos up to that point had been made by a black director whose company was called More Less Media. It's tempting to try to connect disparate facts and presume this white music video maker was not only real, but that he was the man with the ponytail seen by the Ridgeview witness. But we have to remember this was just a story supposedly told by Kilo to Darren, overheard by Naomi, who passed it to Bonnie. But Bonnie believed the white guy was real and that he was involved in Darren's death. To her, the idea that any of the Bottom Boys could have been in on it made no sense because, again, her understanding was that Darren was about to use his own money to bring the whole group to Atlanta to possibly get signed.
And he did have the money, and it was a meeting supposed to be set up. He was supposed to take them to Atlanta. So they would have wanted to go to Atlanta and become stars and get signed. They wouldn't have wanted to beef with him.
So let's say Darren does go to meet Kilo and maybe other members of the Bottom Boys. Where did that meeting happen? We told Bonnie what we'd heard about the possibility of Darren having been killed on Gamble Street. And to our surprise, she heard the same thing.
there are several people who say Gamble is the street where Darren was actually killed.
Because I got a phone call.
From who?
The guy didn't say his name. He just called me and just said where my son got murdered at.
And he didn't leave his name?
He didn't. Like, when he was first talking to me, he didn't, but...
Was it Amir?
Then I ended up... No.
It wasn't
No,
Amir?
it wasn't him. No. He just told me that your son died on Gamble, close by the Gamble Road Center. That's all he said.
But like we said, Bonnie was getting a lot of weird tips and clues, some of which may have been intentionally wrong in order to poison the well in case she was sharing information with police.
Somebody else said they was arguing in a truck and they was on Diamond right across from the store, right where those apartments at. Not the apartments where his truck was at, the ones off the Chambers. They was right in front of that store, and they said when they had music on, but it got real heated. They got real loud. I said, man, that's a lot.
At the intersection of Chambers and Diamond, where this heated argument inside Darren's Jeep supposedly occurred, there's a convenience store called the Rocca Food Mart. This intersection is less than a mile north of the Ridgeview Apartments, where Darren's Jeep and body were ultimately found. But Bonnie doesn't believe this particular story. Why?
I said, that's a lie. It didn't happen like that. Because what was the white guy that's supposed to help do the video?
Since the mystery white music video maker wasn't described as having been present in this scenario, Bonnie threw it out whole cloth. More after the break. Now, back to the show.
The truck melted to the ground to where the little bit that was left of the truck. The fire department used some stuff, and it was like white foamy-like stuff to put it out.
Police came to Bonnie's home the morning Darren's car was discovered to deliver the news that Darren was dead. She made her way to the Ridgeview Apartments, where she walked the crime scene and spoke to people in the gathering crowd. Looking at the remaining foam that had been used to douse the fire from the night before, she noticed something.
When I got there and I seen the door and all that ashy stuff and all that white foam stuff, it was 3 shiny bullets. It looked like somebody took 3 brand new bullets and just laid them on the ground, laid them right in the pile, and they were still shining on top.
We thought it would be weird that what appeared to be new bullets would be laying on top of the fire retardant foam. At that point, anyone who wanted could roam about the crime scene, so evidence could not only be taken, but false evidence could have been added. This point is highlighted by what Bonnie says was done with the door of Darren's Jeep, which had come disconnected from the body of the vehicle and had been left behind by the towing company.
Naomi got the door off the ground and she started writing. She wrote her name up there first, wrote something about man, and everybody was signing the door. The names going all the way down.
Did Naomi take anything from the premises of the burning car?
Yeah, they watched her. Everybody watched her. She took the door with all the signatures on it. She put that in the car. I always thought something weird about her too, because I asked him, was he going to marry her? He said, no, Mom, I believe she worked for the feds or something. I said, why you say that? He said, because she followed me everywhere I go. And as I kept watching her and seeing how she acted toward him, I said, it's like she working for somebody. And I believe it to this day. I really super believe it now.
We didn't know what to make of the statement from Bonnie that Darren supposedly made, telling her that he believed Naomi worked for the feds. It would raise all kinds of questions about why Darren would be with her if he believed this to be the case. The first instance we can find of Naomi on Darren's social media is from the spring of 2016, a little over 3 months before his murder, when he traveled with her to a wedding in Atlanta, where he was her date. We asked Byron about Naomi.
Did you ever hear your mom and Darren talk about Naomi?
Yeah. My mom used to ask all the time. Of course, any other mother would ask, how she's treating you, how you guys' relationship is going.
Did Darren ever share with you some concerns that he had about Naomi?
Yeah, basically, like, who was she working with, the different things, like...
Meaning that she was working potentially with, like, the cops or the feds?
Yeah, the feds.
Like, why would you keep dating someone that you suspected that up? Do you know?
Not sure.
Was he in love?
Honestly, he showed it in a way, but it was like, always like in the back of his head, it was like, it was something that he just felt like it was something right.
Do you happen to know what became of her?
I mean, I haven't been in contact with her. I mean, I see her on Facebook, taking different trips and everything, but,
We reached out to Naomi, and when we finally got in touch with her, she decided against doing an on-the-record interview. We never saw any evidence that she was working for the feds, and it seems highly unlikely that she was an informant sent to date Darren and to report on him. It's weird, too, that if Bonnie believed that she was, why she would believe anything Naomi told her about Darren's last night. The whole Kilo phone call and white music video maker that Bonnie seems to fully believe in, that came from Naomi.
One guy asked Kilo, did he set Darren up? He said, no, man, I ain't set him up. He said, well, you was the last one to see him. And he said, man, he said, Darren dropped me off. And then he went over some chick house.
Again, this is Bonnie recounting something she heard the morning of Darren's death in the parking lot at the Ridgeview Apartments. People were flooding the scene, including members of the Bottom Boys. And in the ensuing chatter, it came out that Kilo had been with Darren the night before. But Kilo said that Darren had parted ways with him and gone to see a girl. In episode 2, Tef Poe said this was something he knew Darren to do, to tell his girlfriend that he had business to attend to, and then to use that time to go hook up with other women. We don't know if Bonnie believed the story about Darren sneaking off after his meeting with Kilo, but she did insist that Kilo wasn't his killer, even if he did, wittingly or not, play a role in getting Darren out of the house that night.
The way I look at it now, I feel like it was a setup. One thing I know, and I tell anybody, Kilo did not kill my son. He got him out the house, and he the one was dealing with the white guy that he claimed that was going to help with the video. But as far as killing him, no. He didn't do that. He didn't do that at all.
So,
because he couldn't drive a stick shift. So who drove, my question is, who drove the stick shift from Gamble all the way to Dime? Because this is what I looked at. From Gamble Street, all the way, you come through Natural Bridge, come to the county, you will burn that clutch out.
So, in our investigation that we have found, the person who was driving it up the hill from Riverview did not know how to drive a stick shift. So, what we are told, that witness, he actually saw that person was not able, whoever it was, did not know how to drive a stick.
Bonnie acknowledged what the Ridgeview witness said about whoever drove Darren's Jeep into the parking lot that night, not knowing how to operate a stick shift. And we wondered if maybe she wasn't trying to drop a hint about Kilo without outright telling us she was suspicious of him, as a way to put us on his trail without actually snitching. But then she said this.
As we're trying to investigate this with you and find, who the murderer could have been,
but the thing is, I'm not going to let nothing or nobody change my mind, because I already know who did it. The FBI did this to my son. I mean, that 900-sheet records, well, one of them saying they've been following him for months. Why are you following him? They tells you. And he said they wouldn't do no but following behind him, just following behind him. That's enough proof right there.
The 900-page record that Bonnie is referring to is an FBI report that was obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request made by St. Louis-based activist and photographer James Cooper, who didn't want to be interviewed for the show. It took 2 years for the FBI to furnish the documents to Cooper, and of the 900 total pages supplied, about 860 of them are fully redacted. The remaining pages contain partial redactions, but what is available to be read makes clear that Darren was being actively surveilled by the FBI starting in March of 2016, all the way up until the time of his death.
My son always told me, he said, Mom, don't you, he said, if anything happens to me, he said, because they going to kill me. I said, please stop saying that. You speaking to me? He said, no, Mom, they follow me everywhere I go. He said, everywhere I go. He said, Mom, I'm telling you, he said, they going to kill me. He said, but if they do, he said, don't you ever let them kill you. Nothing different.
Does this report, which was only made public in September of 2022, lend credence to the idea that the FBI had something to do with Darren's death, as Bonnie seems to believe? And as the report itself states, that the surveillance didn't begin until early in 2016, long after the major Ferguson protest had died down. Why was the FBI so interested in Darren at all? What did they hope to accomplish? And if Darren was being surveilled at the time of his death, why wasn't there more evidence available as to who killed him? And what are we to make of Bonnie's references to the members of the Bottom Boys, Kilo in particular? Could someone Darren knew and trusted, who he was working to make famous, have been involved in his death? That's next time on After the Uprising.
After the Uprising is a production of Double Asterisk and iHeart Podcasts in association with True Stories. Season 2 was written, reported, and produced by Maria Chappelle Nadal, John Duffy, Mallory Kenoy, and Ray Novoselsky. Executive producers are Nikki Ator and Lindsay Hoffman for iHeart Podcasts, John Duffy and Ray Novoselsky for Double Asterisk, David Cassidy and Ruth Vaca for True Stories. Directed by John Duffy and Ray Novoselsky. Theme song and score by Zachary Walter. Sound engineering and mix by John Autry. Fact-checking by Muffin Humes. Marketing by Allison Cantor. Fair Use Legal by Peter Yazzie and Brandon Butler. Legal by Holly DeCan for iHeart Podcasts and Keith Sklar for Double Asterisk. Missouri Sunshine Legal by David Rowland. Show logo by iHeart Podcasts using a photo by Attilio D'Agostino. Our interns were Hannah Madura and Rosemary Feary. Website by Stephanie Clark. Recorded at David Weber's Airtime Studios in Bloomington, Indiana. We want to acknowledge additional investigation that became part of this podcast was conducted by Detective Adams in the St. Louis County Police and the FBI, who did not participate in this podcast, and by Amir Brandy, Mosi Secret, and Darnell Singleton. If you like our work, check out our other podcasts. You can find us at doubleasteriskmedia.com and on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Support us on Patreon. If you're enjoying the show, leave us a rating and review on your favorite podcast app. Thank you to Jamie Dennis, Danny Gonzalez, Jonathan Hartwig, Beth Ann Macaluso, Matt McDonough, Melissa McKinnis, Ryan Mears, Tony and Val Novoselsky, and the family and loved ones of Darren Seals. Bottom Boys and DOA tracks used via fair use. So was the news reporting archival. Copyright 2024 Double Asterisk Inc.